So basically what today's webinar is going to go over is points. Basically, uploading the points using the Maryland field codes and SurvCE and Magnet software, converting and exporting the survey points using both softwares, understanding the process of importing the points into Civil 3D, understanding point groups that are in the Maryland templates and how we adjust the properties within those groups, understand the point properties and styles, the ability to print out the points, and the process to create points and export them for stakeout. I know there's a lot of handouts. There's like 99 slides. We're not going to get to all those slides, but it will be there for you to reference back to. This is just a generalized agenda. What we're going to go over from 9 to 9:20, explain the field codes, where you can find them, and what they're used for. 9:20 to 9:40, exporting those points once you take all your shots, and how you export them in a format that's available to import them into your Civil 3D drawing. And then 9:40 to 10:20, that's important, uploading them into your drawing. And then we'll have a 10-minute break from 10:20 to 10:30. And then after the break, we'll get into actually working with the point groups and changing some of those properties. Then 10:45 to 11, again, a little bit more point properties and styles that people should be familiar with. 11:15, creating and printing the point reports that it should be placed in the technical folder of your design. 11:15, 11:45, creating stakeout points so you can, take your design and actually go out and verify your points and elevations during construction. And also from 11:45 to 12 o'clock, we'll just have some Q&A and open discussion. And keep in mind that during this entire webinar, please, feel free to speak out. And if there's something that you don't understand or you have a better idea or suggestion on, believe me, this is very informal. This isn't the end all of doing things. It's just a process that I've learned throughout the years doing this. So don't feel as though this is the only way to do things. And I'm sure there's offices out there and people out there that do it differently. So if there's a better way or something that you say, hey, Dan, this is something that we've used in the office and, share all your thoughts. This is what this training is about.
Plenty of ways to skin that cat.
That's right. So to get started, again, this is just kind of what we're going over. It's kind of repetition of, what the actual, agenda is. I know there's still folks out there, you're using the SurvCE, with the old data collectors. So we still have those instructions. So I'm still going to share those instructions with you. The newer data collectors, the Topcon FC 5000s and 6000s, they have the Magnet software installed on those, so they're a little bit different, but the process is still the same as far as exporting and importing those points from the data collectors using the flash drive, USB drive, whatever you want to call it, to get those points off of the data collector and into your Civil 3D, and then vice versa. And then uploading the points in the Civil 3D and then working with the groups, changing your point sizes, printing out the points and point groups, exporting points from Civil 3D, stakeout points, and adding them into Magnet software. I'm not going to go over all this. Like I said in the beginning, I'm just kind of the Maryland field codes. Hopefully everybody's aware of this and it's been set up in your offices. And if it hasn't been, reach out to me individually and I can most certainly walk you through the process on where to get that information from. On the SharePoint site, it's under the Maryland NRCS field codes under the engineering SharePoint site. And then for MDA users, it's still on that shared drive under RC, under engineering. And then we have the Civil 3D support files and then the Maryland NRCS field codes located there. And depending on which type of software you're using, is going to depend on which file that you're going to upload. So if you're using the Magnet software, you're going to have the XML file. And if you have the SurvCE software, you're going to use the FCL file. And there's also an Excel spreadsheet in there, just called the Maryland codes. I know it says Magnet in there, but it's just basically an export of what the field codes are and the explanation of those codes, and we'll get into that. Point group summaries. This is pretty important based off of what we use or how the point groups are set up. Point groups are very powerful, and I'd recommend trying to get comfortable using this system because this is how it's set up in our template. So the control points are from 1 to 99. So those points are any hubs, top of well, something that's an actual elevation that you don't want to have created in that specific surface. So the only time that when you create an existing surface, it's going to come from the existing ground point group, which is, existing ground points 100 through 2,999. Now we can get into adjusting that and adding points and including points and excluding points from that existing ground. But just as you're, starting to do surveys, I even do it myself sometimes when I start surveying. I start with point 1, point 2, and then we'll start doing the topo survey, and then like, oh man, I continued on with, point 3 and 4 and so forth. It's not hard to go back, and you can adjust it in the point group. So don't feel as though it's a end all that you can't go back and change it, but just try to get in the habit. Once you start that actual survey, just kind of keep it in your mind. Hey, I got to start at point 100 if, we're starting to shoot, ground shots for the surface. Staking is 3,000 to 4,999. So they're the points that you're going to actually use to create points in Civil 3D to stake out. And then the as-built points going from 5,000 to 9,999. So that's kind of the 4 general point group summaries, if you will, of how you should think when you go out surveying and start taking points. Not going to go over every one of these, but it isn't, it's an Excel spreadsheet that you can look at, and it just kind of gives you a general idea of what's included in each one of these point groups. So you'll notice on each one that, you have a code, and then what the name is, what the symbol is going to be shown, and then just a line type. You have a point group name, and then the prefixes. So the prefixes are the ones that where it has TBM. So if you write TBM and then it has that asterisk after it, you can write anything after it as long as it has that prefix in front of it. It's going to put it in that specific point group. Now, the other thing to take in consideration, along with the prefixes, you have the point ranges that we just went over. So if you have a TBM, even though it might be point number 300, it's going to still put it in the controlled ground shots, but it's also going to have it in your existing ground because you have it in point 300, so it's under existing ground. So you have to keep that in mind, that there's 2, I guess, locations where this information is taken from: the prefixes of what your description is, along with that point range. And as you go through these, you could see, point ranges for all of them. And that's just saying that it's based off of the actual prefix. It doesn't matter the point range. So when you're talking about the actual ground, points excluded are the 3,000 to 999. So basically it's saying the existing ground is the existing ground layer or point group. It's excluding, all your, survey control points, as I alluded to before, 1 through 99. Points excluded also are, it should be 1 through 99 on that also, along with anything that has these prefixes with it. The as-built, you'll see 5,000 to 999, 9,999, that's your as-built layer. And staking, same thing, 3,000 to 4,999. And then again, with the staking, we show the control points on our staking. So, when you do that point group, when we control our point groups, we'll go over that on making sure that you show those survey points when you actually go out and, stake those out. You have it on your plan. You're showing your TBMs and your control benchmarks on your actual plan. So I'm not going to go through every one of these slides, but this is, just goes through all the different processes between the SurvCE and the Magnet software and how you're going to do it. Hopefully, everyone has this, on their computers already or on their data collectors already. But this just kind of goes over, the process of, where they should be located, how you upload them, how to use them. And it's a lot different between the two. I know with the SurvCE, it's a little bit different. Like, it doesn't give you if you start typing, it doesn't automatically show like little hot buttons up top, if you will. Like with the FC5000 and Magnet software, it shows little hot buttons. So if you had recent, codes that you have, hit or, put in, it'll automatically show those up top, and it's just a little bit faster, as far as the actual process of, getting the points into the data collector.
Hey, Dan.
That's on the, yes.
Remember when you were just saying that it should exclude points 1 through 99 as well as 3,000 and 9,999?
Yes.
I didn't think it did, and I just looked at the point group properties for existing ground on my open drawing, and it does not have 1 through 99 on there.
So it doesn't have 1 through 99 on there. Okay, so what it excludes then, between the two, if it has one or the other, it's going to, say that it's not going to take either the actual description or the point group. So you can have either or. And I think when Jacob and I set this up, we were saying to ourselves, well, let's not limit that point group to, just the actual point numbers. Let's just do the prefixes in case people do mess it up and, have points that are, outside of that range of 1 through 99. So I think that's why we did it that way. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, I just changed it to see if it messes up my surface.
Yeah. The next step is once you have everything surveyed, completed, done, the next step is that, you bring your data collector back into the office. My recommendation is trying to do that, fairly quick while it's fresh in your memory. But it's just the import export process, between the SurvCE and the Magnet. And again, the processes are the same. It's the same output. It's just a matter of different ways of doing it. The main point in this, when you're exporting your points, that you have to keep in mind is the coordinate order, meaning that you have the PNEZD. You can change that if you want to, but as long as when you import them points, it just has to match that correct order. So if you do PENZD, when you import your points, you just got to make sure that when you import them, it's set to PENZD. If not, you'll see that your drawing, when it comes in, it's just goes in crazy. And you're like, man, what's going on? I really blew this whole survey. Just go back to it and just figure out, okay, well, I got to re-export that project and just re-export it to the correct order. So I find that a lot, with people, they'll call me and say, I don't know what happened to my survey. It's, out in left field, or if it's upside down or whatever. It all comes down to that coordinate order. And the other thing is the delimiter. Most of the time we use comma. I don't know why they have different options, but some use the CSV file, which is an Excel file, and you can change it that way. We've just always, taught it in the ASCII file, so it's just a text file. Doesn't mean that you can do it other ways. This is just one way that I'm used to doing, and this is the one that I'm comfortable with using. So if other people have other ways of doing it, most certainly you're coming out with the same output. It doesn't matter. We're all getting to the same point. And again, it's just a matter of, it's the same thing. You're opening up a job, you're exporting it. there might be some type of error message, or not error message. In this case, it says error, but depending on if you're using GPS or if you're using hybrid or if you're using robotics, it's grid to ground transformation. It's just basically talking about the coordinates here. Sometimes you just have to close that out, and you'll know right away as soon as you import those points if it's correct or not. And one thing that in the beginning I always got confused with on the Magnet software is, okay, what am I doing? To file or from file? You just got to think as it that you have your working job open, and you're bringing that file into your drawing. So to file, so you're bringing it to your job, and then when you export it, it's from your job, so you're exporting it out. And the one cool thing with even Magnet, it's got that little bulldozer dozer on the right hand side here. I actually did a job with a contractor where I exported that file type to them, and they actually put it into their system because they were demoing a piece of equipment, and it had my entire drawing on there, and basically they pushed a button and the blade went up and down based off of the elevation of what my design was. So that was pretty cool to see. And again, here's all your different file types that Magnet gives you. And again, we just use the TXT file, the text file. Just again, a different way, PNEZD. And again, the file size, you can file style, you can drop down and see the different types that you have. It's the same way with the SurvCE program. And again, this is just talking about, the coordinate system and how you're exporting it, if you're doing GPS or if you're just doing, ground grid with no type of datum. And then it talks about how many points you have. So it tells you how many points were exported in this one. And then you exit out. One thing to note on, at least on the TopCon Magnet one, make sure that you eject that USB. It's just like a regular computer. So you should go down to the bottom and hit the little USB and eject it, the flash drive. I've not had it happen on this particular, but on the computers I've had it happen. If you don't eject it, it'll erase all that data off of there. So just something to keep in mind when you're going through this process. If you get in the habit of doing this, and it just becomes second nature.
The old ones don't have that option, so I just make sure it's off before I unplug it.
They don't have that on the old Surveyor Pluses. No, you're right. I think I just yanked it out of there. I don't even think I turned it off, to be honest. So just something to keep in mind. Does anybody have any questions on the Maryland field codes and exporting those points from the data collector?
Hey, Dan, Zach here.
Yes.
Could you go back to, I think it was the 43rd slide, or one more, 42.
Okay.
Well, it's not this one, but I noticed one of the coordinate orders you had was name NEZD versus like P for the point. Yeah, like this one.
Yes.
I don't know if it works for ours, but I know for the national template Civil 3D stuff, if you put name as opposed to point, it'll let you put numbers and letters, alphanumeric, in there. So if you're transferring stuff over and you seem to have lost some points, just make sure that you're putting in the right style, because you could, have accidentally put a letter in with your point number, and then it'll just disappear if you don't use the right style.
Okay, so you're saying on this specific file style, and to be honest, I had not even taken note on that. So you're saying there's an option that says point on here and also name?
Yeah, so like see how in the file style right here it has name any.
Yep.
Yeah, so name will let you use alphanumeric, so you can use letters and numbers, whereas the P point will only let you use numbers.
I got you.
So.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't realize that. I've just always used at least on this one, the name, and maybe that's why I never ran into that problem of where I haven't seen it come up. But that's a good
I've
catch.
had a couple times where some of my points just kind of disappeared because I accidentally put some letters in there, and they, if you just do the PNEZD, it'll never show up.
Right, I gotcha. That's good to know. Thank you for
or
that.
Be more careful.
Yeah, or that.
And if that happens, you can just edit the text file and delete the letters out of there, and it should handle it.
Yeah, most certainly. Yeah, that's definitely another option that you can go in the text file and edit that. That is correct. And even through, not even the text file itself, once you go into edit points, once you have them on Civil 3D and you don't see them, you can do it that way also. Any other questions? I mean, does everyone use the field codes for the most part?
Yeah, I use them. I just
Okay.
need to print out a sheet and glue it to the tripod.
Yeah, we have some laminated, but our data collectors don't like to use those. They kind of make their own codes up, so we have to decipher.
Okay. Yeah, I know some of the older data collectors, it's a little tougher, but with the Magnet software, it's definitely much easier to use. And the whole purpose behind the field codes really is to help. And, we're different than the private sector, obviously, because what happens in the private sector, you have a surveying group that actually goes out, does the surveying, has specific, field codes and field descriptions that, when the actual designer uploads those points, they actually have field descriptions that's going to basically draw all the lines in automatically, so the drafter, when they start drafting, and it's all that information is there, so they don't have to think about it because they haven't even been out to the site. Where we're a little bit different, we're actually going out doing the survey, we're bringing the points in, we're drawing all the line work in. So, at one point in time, it was in discussion that we were going to try to do that field to finish in the SurvCE portion, and now it's considered the description codes in Civil 3D. But we felt, and this is, when Jacob and I were, developing these templates, that, we could do that. It's not a problem making those, but, is it necessary that, we're not doing 1,000 shots where we need to connect, so much fence. There's other ways around it, but if people feel as though that would be useful, we can most certainly, in the future, think about, coming up with their own set of, field description codes to, help, I guess, speed up the process, if you will, of, putting that line work in automatically. All right.
And FYI, when he says Jacob, he's referring to Jacob Dieguez, the former Assistant State Conservation Engineer, not Jacob Kiesling. So do not ask me.
Good point. All right. So uploading your points into Civil 3D. Hopefully everyone is set up, on their templates with SharePoint. And if you're on a state system, you have to do it a little bit differently, unfortunately. But when you open up Civil 3D, you select new drawing, select the template you'll be using. And then, once you have that, opened up, then you can start with your points and importing your points. Obviously, when you go out and do a survey, a lot of people don't realize how important a survey is. And I can't explain to folks enough that, you can't have too many points by any means. Well, you can, but technically speaking, the more points you have, the better surface you're going to get.
Amen.
And as far as, when you're looking at all the different, grade breaks and things like that, we have a lot of new folks that have come aboard, and I can only, tell you from experience that, working with the seasoned technicians that are out there, ask questions, ask them why they're taking that shot, or, what should you be looking for as far as shots. There's a lot of shots out there that are missed, and, it'll just really throw off your entire design. So I can't stress it enough that, surveying is probably one of the most important parts of this process, of what we do as technicians in our job. And it's, I think, overlooked way too much. And, you know, even now we use LiDAR a lot on some of these jobs. And we should be, field verifying that those, LiDAR, shots, contour lines are, compared to what's actually out there. So it's always good to, make sure that, the points that you have, you feel confident enough that, when you bring those points in, what that, topography looks like when you bring those points in. So just keep that in mind. This goes into basically, different ways of how you, import your points. And we'll go through this also through Civil 3D. But this is just the slides going through it. You on the home tab, go through your points, point creation tools, and then you have, the import points icon. They do have like a little, drop down here that has more information that we'll get into later on. And then it's just hitting the plus sign and then importing your points, selecting the file location of where it's at. And then again, make sure that, you're specifying that correct PNEZD, and that I can't stress that enough. When you export these, this is what you're exporting, and then this is what you're importing, that same style format that you're importing those in. And most of the time, if you see the little X, and I've had this happen before where there's a little X up there, it's basically saying something doesn't match, something's not right. So either one, you exported those points incorrectly to, it might be a, I don't know, PNE comma delimited, or PNE space delimited, and it's going to give you an error. So most of the time, if you have a check mark up here, it's saying the format is correct. Doesn't mean that it's in the correct order, but the format is correct. So also keep that in mind too. I don't use too much of the filtering on this. Now the filtering will basically kind of filter out the ones that it doesn't think this is needed. So if you only have 3 that you're bringing in, it might filter out all the other ones because you're only bringing in 3. Or if you're bringing in 5 different types of point format descriptions, or the format, then it's going to filter out the other ones. So it just kind of gives you less options, I guess, is more or less what it is. And then it does give you a preview, and just keep in mind when you scroll down through this, it's not going to show you every single point. So keep that in mind, as far as going through this, that it's not going to show you every single point, like, oh, it's only showing point 2 through 50. It's just giving you a basically a scenario of, does this look right? Is this my northern? Is this my easting? Is this my point elevation? So it's just a preview. Add points to a point group. If you were importing, stakeout points or something just specific, like if you were exporting points from a data collector that maybe you added more points and you said, okay, well, I went out, did a survey. I took my initial survey. I had points, 100 to 200. And now I said, oh, I need to go add more points. Now I started at point 200 and I went to point 250. You can put that additional points, 200 to 250, and just add that to a point group and say additional points you needed for survey or something like that. And you can add those specific points to that point group. Advanced options, do elevation adjustment if possible. I've selected that before, and I just keep it as default as selected, and I've unchecked it. I don't know. Has anybody experienced anything with that? I've not personally, dealt with that at all. Maybe it's something to do with your, benchmarks and trying to, change that, but I've never, had that, change any of my importing of my points. Has anybody else had that out there?
Hey, Dan, I used it on one of the designs that I was doing recently off LiDAR, and it just made everything super wonky. I had to add some culvert pipe shots just so I made sure I knew exactly where I was at, and it just changed everything.
And that's when you had it selected then?
Yes, and then I went back and unselected it and did it again, and everything stayed as it was.
But you're saying LiDAR, because LiDAR, it's a whole different thing. You're bringing in a DEM file. So how would
I
you're
was putting
just,
points over top of the LiDAR
I gotcha. I see.
just for reference points.
Okay. And just I'm just going to look through these chats real quick. There was a question about, finding discrepancies between LiDAR elevations and GPS collected elevations. If so, any suggestions on which one to use? So that's a great question. It all depends on when LiDAR was taken. I know here a few months ago, well, say a few months ago, it's probably been longer than that. But the Russian satellites kind of were taking on some kind of hit, and we were getting some inaccurate GPS elevations. So if you did a survey in a certain time period, and I don't know exactly what that time period was, but we've had some elevation discrepancies based off of LiDAR. We just updated our rovers through DeCarlo, and now most of our shots are pretty much on point regarding the elevations with LiDAR. Now, one thing I can say is, LiDAR is pretty, you got to use it, I guess, loosely, but at some point in time, you do have to do some type of field verification on that. And if you go out to a site and that you're on a specific contour with LiDAR and you're just looking at it and shooting it, and if it's 3 foot off, 4 foot off, you can adjust that LiDAR based off of raising and lowering your LiDAR surface to match what the actual GPS elevations are. So you can adjust that. Hopefully that's answers your question, Andrew, on that.
Hey Dan,
Yes.
what were you saying about the satellites were out of whack? When was that?
I knew you were going to ask that.
Because I did a survey 2 weeks ago, and it was 7 feet off from the LiDAR.
7 feet. So this happened probably, I'm going to say it was right after COVID hit, and it was, for probably almost a year, little over a year.
Okay, so not recently then.
It's not been recently, and if your elevations are that far off, my suggestion, I don't know, you might need an update on your rover. Or what are you using, the Hyper VRs for your rover?
It's the
It's just the Hyper R's or the Hyper V's where you're doing the base station and also the or you're using the SurvCE.
I have a SurvCE.
Okay. I don't know if they have an update. My suggestion is, I think we got those SurvCEs from Quran East. So Jimmy would be the one to contact on that and see if there's an update. And if you don't have his contact information, I don't know, Jason Watt, I don't know, do you still talk to Jimmy in regards to the equipment you guys have out there in Frederick?
Yes, Matt and I have his contact information.
Okay. Yeah,
I
so
had Florida GPS and called him one time, and he said since it came from a different part of the state, I can't remember exactly what it was, but update the rough proximity, and then it worked better like that. So if you move that unit from quite a distance from where it was used last, you may have had to update something in it.
I guess that could be
Sorry to be so vague.
Yeah. Yeah, GPS kind of, and I've run into this, John, too. I mean, not to the point where it's 7 foot off, but it seemed like, 4 foot has probably been our max that we've probably had ours, and at least in Cecil. But 7 foot is, a pretty significant amount. And I guess if you're using a base station and, GLONASS, with the, you're not using RTK where it's not being fixed by Opus and you're not sending it off, you could show discrepancies like that. I remember when we first got our GPS that, we had not that large of discrepancies. 7 foot just seems really extreme.
Yeah, that's out of the norm. I mean, I've never seen one that far. Maybe the satellites were bad that day, or something was going on. So
yeah, and that's another great point, because when you're doing GPS, and you have to have a minimum amount of satellites, one, to start, taking shots. And the longer that you let that base station set there and, gather that information, get the correct, curvature of the earth and everything else, I mean, the longer it sits there, the more accurate that is. If you just set it up and you start taking points, it could be, that far off. I know I was always told, when you're doing it that way, you should do a minimum of 15 minutes, but it's recommended to do 30 minutes to set that base station up and let that gather information before you even start surveying. Now, if you're using RTK, it's a totally different ball game. You're already connected to that base station that has already, has the corrected elevations.
Well, I'm gonna survey on Friday. We'll see if it is bad again. If it is, might have to update something.
Yeah, definitely take that in mind, consideration. And if you have any problems with it, just shoot me a IM and I can, or Jason and Matt, they can give you the contact of Jimmy, because I'm almost positive that that's the same unit that probably Sam's been using out there.
Yeah.
Now, it might be a good idea to check into a known point, to a control point somewhere, and see if your information is off.
Yeah, definitely. And if you don't have that layer, there's actually a GIS layer for all the benchmarks throughout everywhere that you can download. And if you don't have that, I can most certainly send that out to you.
Okay, thank you.
And then I see Zach, he's just saying that there's a couple things you could do with LiDAR and GPS surface to check average difference in the surface, the outliers, etc. One of the guides on the NRCS retrieve site goes into great detail on that. So regarding that, with retrieve, that's just a NRCS training module, if you will, and that's available to everyone. I know I've gone over it before in previous trainings, and if you don't have access to that, you just have to, basically get permissions to get into that. It does go into great detail, and I will just say that those instructions on that go into a lot of detail. And if you want to know a lot more about CAD, that's the place to go. And Civil 3D. We're just kind of scratching the surface, and the trainings that I hold are kind of to get by, to help people out and get designs out the door. But if you're willing to learn and sit through those, most certainly we can get you access to that. Uploading the points. So once you have your points in, a lot of times you'll notice that you'll see, oh, my points are not there. So there's a couple things that you'll have to do. You have to update them, refresh them, and then you'll see that your points are finally there, and then you can zoom to them. Again, you have your point groups, exclamation point. Basically, you have to refresh and update those, and then all of a sudden, the way the templates are set up, it's automatically set up to show your contours existing 1 to 5. That's just how it's set up in our templates. And then as the user, you have to adjust those accordingly to where, what you need to have shown. And then this is talking about going over your map and turning that off. And then this is just adjusting the scale. And then again, you can turn off your surface style. And then turning that off to no display. And then that way, you can really look at your points, which we're going to go into. It's recommended to lock your points. And the only reason I say that, especially if you're new, if you accidentally click and drag something and, you have a point attached to that and you move it, you have a polyline that you selected and you accidentally hit a point and you move that point's going to go right with that polyline. And all of a sudden, you moved your point. And then now you're like, man, why does that topo look off? Just keep in mind, it's just good habit to do that in the beginning. But if you're, if you feel comfortable not doing it, that's fine too. But I'm just going to stress, you can move those points if they're not locked. And you can unlock them too to move them or adjust them. And then when you have points, you'll see that there's two different, I guess, grips, if you will, that or nodes that are displayed. I guess they're grips when you select that point. One is a diamond, and basically this will move the point. This is why it's recommended to lock your points first, just in case you move that point accidentally. And the square is actually a leader that you can, pull that out if, you have multiple points in a location that you want to, see what's going on. You can actually put a leader on that existing point. And the smaller the scale you select the model space, the smaller the points become. So down here, we talked about scales before. The smaller that scale is, the smaller the points are. So when you're actually drawing lines and things like that, it might be best to have that on if you have multiple points. But, if it's only, 30 or 40 points, you might be able to have those points set to the scale that you're doing everything at, 1 to 20, what have you.
I think that classifies as too many points.
You can never have too many points, remember?
That's a lot.
That's a pond, and it had a lot of stuff going on. This just kind of goes over everything. So let's go into the actual, because this is working with points, and this is all the uploading points. So I'm going to go into Civil 3D and kind of go over those instructions a little bit. So once you have your drawing open, and in this case, it's just, I have working with points drawing open. Like I said, many ways of doing this. The easiest way, if you have a ribbon, most people like to use ribbons. It's just, it's easy. But if you don't use ribbons, you can do it other ways. Point creation tools, you can do it that way, or you can right click on this. You can hit create. So if you right click on points create, it also brings up your create points. Or you can go to the ribbon. Again, if you click this just gives you more information, and we'll go over a little bit when we're doing stakeout points. But the different ones across here, the ones that we'll be using are the manual one. And you can actually do multiple points along a vertice, along alignment, along a center line or waterway. You can do offsets on a specific, waterway, and it'll put those points automatically at certain distances. There's many ways of doing this, and I'm not going to get into every one. I'm going to go over the basics of this stuff, but there's plenty of things to do with, adding points and creating points. But first, we got to get our points in here. So all the way to the right is the import points tab. Now, the one thing I will say that people, or you might see, if you go into that retrieve, they talk about survey databases, and they talk about equipment databases, and again, figure prefixes, and that's where that's that kind of field to finish and the line work codes that I was, explaining about earlier. We don't use the survey databases. It was just decided upon, when we started these trainings that, we don't need a list of all the projects, because basically what it does, it houses all your surveys in one database that you can access. So you can, be in this drawing and just drag and drop your points, or, create that, point data right from this list. Does it have its benefits? Yes. But like I said, we just opted to continue on with, using this process. Doesn't mean that you can't go the other way and learn that way. So I'm going to show you this way. So important points, again, comes up with the splash window, hit the plus sign, and it's going to, bring you to where are you going to bring these points in from. And I've already made one up, the points training text. Again, it hits the check mark because it matches the selected point file type. Format is basically what it's saying. So it has that, PNEZD format associated with it. And then I know in this case it was PNEZD. We have point numbers, the northern eastern point elevation, raw description. And again, like I said, it doesn't show you all the points. So don't be alarmed that, all your points are, not shown here. Do the elevation adjustment if possible. I leave that on for doing it this way, but it sounds like if you're bringing in points and trying to import them into an existing LiDAR, you might want to have that unchecked. So just keep that in mind if that does happen to you. Go ahead and click OK. And you'll notice here, we'll have the exclamation points for our points, but you can click on your point groups and right click and hit update. And then it updates all your points. And then if you right click all points, you can click the zoom to, and you can regen. And then this shows all the points that came in. And again, if I was set at 30 scale, you can kind of see, some of these points get, pretty crazy in here where I can't see them. So that's just bringing the points in to your actual drawing and updating them. So if you don't see your topo show up right away, that's because your exclamation point, is shown on your existing ground, and you have to make sure that you update that in order for that to happen. So anytime if you were to make, or if you see any type of exclamation point over here, that means you've done some type of adjustment to that point or one of those points in that point group, and you just have to update that in order for it to take effect. It's the same way with surfaces. Surfaces does, kind of has the same thing where you have this exclamation point that it's out of date. It's the same way with points. It's just that they're out of date. You have to update them. Any specific questions on bringing the points in? So as explained before, if you select an actual point, and I'll just make these points a little bit smaller. I'm going to put no display on my surface just so it doesn't confuse. We don't see all the contours in here. So we'll just concentrate on this 382. And me personally, I'd like to keep the photo on originally, but then, I keep my photo off. So when you do that, you can go to your geolocation tab and just turn your map off. And another thing, as far as creating points, there's a little pin tab here. If you're working in your points and you want to keep this open all the time, you can pin this, and then that way it doesn't go away while you're doing all your point, manipulation or creation or what have you. You might want to pin that so you don't have to go back up to the point creation tool on the home tab, or right click point creation tool. It'll pin it, and it's there for you. So just looking at a point in general. So like I explained, you have two different grips here. This is the label grip. So you select that and you can put it wherever you want. I didn't lock my points right now. So if I took this center node, so this is move point, I just moved my point that easily. Now you'll notice it actually refreshed it. So sometimes it won't refresh, but if it doesn't refresh, and if I turn on my surface, you'll notice, and as long as your existing ground surface is set to rebuild automatically, which should be defaulted in our templates, you'll notice that changes dynamically as I move that point. So if this is my waterline, you'll notice that, everything is changing dynamically. So if you move your point one way or the other, it can, really change the look of the topography. So the one thing that you want to do is you want to go in there. Like I said, it's not 100% necessary that you have to do that, but it is a recommendation to go in there and, lock your points. So if you just go right click points, you can lock them. And now you'll notice that, I can't move that point anywhere. It's not even giving me the option to, move that point. So if I wanted to, select multiple points and I was like, I had a line or something and I wanted to move them, it won't allow me to move them. Just good habit to get into, as you're actually going, working with your points and things like that. You can zoom to certain points too. You got a zoom to point. And then also, we went over this before, under the transparent tab. And this is, again, if you wanted to go to a specific point saying, I know I shot point 1 and I know it was, my TBM, go to your transparent command, zoom to point. And if you have your dynamic set up, it'll say zoom to point number. And I can say point 1, here's my point 1. I think a lot of people don't use the transparent commands. They're kind of, like I said in the last training, they used to be over here and actually, they are over here. They're still showing here. But, they dedicated a special tab in the ribbon now for transparency commands because people do use those. And you can even go to a point object, point name, once we go, but you have to be in like a polyline or line command before you actually select these. These here, you can actually, go to them without being in a command first. Because most of the time with the transparency command, you're supposed to be in a command and then it's transparent to that command that you're using. So it's part of that. But these here on the zoom to point, these, you don't have to. So if I wanted to zoom to point 10, if I had one, I don't have one. So we'll say, okay, here's 100. And it's starting out with the point elevation and such. I can go from point to point. So I can do, a point to point, or I can do an object. So now I can select all my water lines. And now it's just drawing that point break line along my water line as I select them. Or if I knew the exact, numbers, I can go through my numbers and do that. Again, this is just a command that is just a faster way of doing things. Like I said, if we had the point description set up, then, it would draw all this stuff automatically. But there are a lot of things that we would have to set up, on the state side of things in order to have all that stuff run. I know there was some, the reason why these points are shown this way, originally we had this sent to like a magenta color, and then people said, oh, we want it, a more of a lighter color so it doesn't come out as much, because there are some folks that, put all their points on their design and that is shown on the design. But again, you can get into, adjusting the point sizes and things like that. And the text height, we can kind of go into that before we get into the point groups. But I just wanted to make sure if there was anything specific that people had requests for, I guess, that they, see themselves changing more than anything.
Yeah, I always change the colors that it comes in. It comes in as gray, and
Yes.
but I do like a red, white, and blue. Like I'll make the point numbers all red. I'll make the elevations all white, and then I'll make the description all blue.
Okay.
And then it helps me find what I'm looking for, especially when they're all jumbled up, like you see in the bottom right there. Just it helps clarify all that. And then I usually leave the point to whatever color it is because that doesn't much matter to me. But yeah, it's good.
Hey, Dan.
Oh, so
Yes.
also what I do is on my like survey point, like my control points, that's good for construction guys to know like where your benchmark is, and if they can find the nails, they can get elevations from there. That's helpful to them. And then what's really helpful is just making the survey control point group visible while everything else is invisible, and then setting the the style to where it shows the northing, easting, and all that jazz. Rather than, because I was doing like a multi-leader, but just putting it on that survey control and then changing that style to show the descriptors that are really valuable for the contractors. It goes on the plans. It's nice and easy. Saves like 10, 15 minutes.
So you're just talking about the northeast name, elevation description on that, just on your benchmarks, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I set the point style to everything else as,
Just the regular.
non-visible.
Yeah, like this. So you're basically showing your plan this way. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Hey, Dan.
Yes.
Do you say you want to exclude a point from your elevation? How do you do that once they're already in CAD?
All right, we'll get that. We'll go over that in point groups. I'll show you how to do that for sure. But is there anything else with points before I kind of show you, how to change like, the height and, getting into the actual settings of your points and adjusting those? Because I do want to show you that real quick, just so you're aware of, how the label style works on these points and how they were developed. And does anybody feel as though using that red, white, and blue will benefit them? Is that something that you'd like to see added in the, next round of updated templates? Having that?
Did we have the different colors before?
We did, and we took them out, and it goes back and forth. I don't know why. It's just, everybody has their certain ways of doing things. But if there's certain, specifics that people like to have, I most certainly want to, add those so people aren't doing it constantly. If it's something that you constantly use and other people are going to benefit from, we might as well put it in the templates.
I'm not partial.
I like the different colors.
Okay.
Who cares, Joe? Just kidding. Thank you.
And as far as the sizes, I think right now, they're, and we can go in the properties, but we do have like a smaller option and then a larger option, or the normal option. Is the size okay? Do you guys see yourself changing the size of these points?
If I ever do change the size, normally I just use the scale, like make it a scale that makes sense and just do it that way, as opposed to like changing the size of all the points themselves.
So you'll just change the model space scale.
Yeah, if there's a lot of points and it's all cluttered and I can't really see what I'm looking at, I'll just change the scale as opposed to messing around with the point descriptions and all that.
Right. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to kind of go into, this is, like I said, changing the actual, sizes of the actual points themselves. I'm just going to put all points up here real quick. And see, you'll notice once we get into point groups, once you have this hierarchy, it takes over all the, so that IP hub for it was actually a TBM. And before I put that above, all points is below that. So the hierarchy takes control of how it's going to be displayed. And we'll go over that more in point groups. If you wanted to change, a specific size of a point, or anything within that, point. I know people like to see these points a little bit smaller. I mean, I can create another one that, smaller. That's why we have this smaller point group style in here under the points. And if you go to properties, the number, elevation, description, the smaller one. You click apply, the points get smaller. Now you can see if we go into the general tab, it's at 0.078 compared to if we go back to the name, elevation, description here, that's at the 0.1250. That's the 1/8 inch, height that we normally see. So that's one way of doing it. Just, choosing, that specific, way of, changing your point height from going to, big to small. The other way is that you can go into your number, elevation, click apply. So right now this is, let me go to point groups. I want to get back to my original. I don't know why I keep picking that other one, but I believe this one is also small. Click apply, and it just does the smaller version. So I know a lot of people were, asking for that smaller layout on those. Just like you said, Zach, you can change that scale to make it smaller. But, if I was at 20 scale, for example, I'm at that smaller, I can kind of see those a little bit better. The point still stays the same size, but if I go into my properties here and make that back to the normal size, you can see how much bigger they get. So that's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is going into your settings and under your points and under your label style. And in this case, the way to find that, you have to select your label and just make sure number, elevation, description. That's what this label style is. So number, elevation, description. You want to right click edit, and you'll notice that there's 3 components to this actual text. And to change that, here's the height that you can change. So if you want to change your point number, I don't know, to 0.06, point elevation to 0.06, and your point description to 0.06. And then again, your point, you can change your this size if you want to. It's totally up to you. Or you can just leave it the way it is. But that's how you change the actual size of that. And you'll see once you hit apply, those get a little bit smaller. And you can do this, as you're doing the drawing. Like if you don't want to change the scale, you want it 20 scale for whatever reason, you just want to change the size of them as you're, doing your points, you can do that. Any questions on that? So that's just kind of getting into the, sizes of the actual, point sizes. And you just got to remember that there's 3 components within that point that you're adjusting. So basically we went through the importing, and uploading the points into Civil 3D and also working with the points in Civil 3D. The next thing that we're going to, talk about is working with point groups. So we're 5 minutes early on that. So we'll take a 10-minute break and, come back here at 10:25. All right, I have 10:25. There was a question in the chat regarding locking the points on the specific layer compared to actually locking the points in tool space, and what might be the advantages or disadvantages. So when you put your points in, they go on the survey points layer. So you could lock that layer so you can't move it or anything. But if any other points go on that layer, they also can't be moved. So you can do it that way. If you rather do that, that's fine. I think the best way to do it is, just going through your points and, locking them that way. And if you notice, as soon as I lock those points, there will be a little, I don't know, like a no, it's like a cross to a pencil basically saying that there's no edits on those. So if I unlock that, you'll notice that now that has gone away. So that's the one way to know that your points have been locked. So even if I go to edit points, for example, you'll notice right now they're not locked. And if I go into points now and go to lock them and then go into edit points again, you'll notice that they'll have that you're not able to move that point. So you're not able to do anything with this point. So you're not even able to double click in here and change a description, an elevation, number, or anything. All right, so let's go back here. So I guess the remainder of the training is going to be going over the working with the point groups, changing the properties and things. That's what we're going to go over now. And then we go into the point properties and styles, which we kind of went over a little bit. And then we're going to create the reports and then creating the points for stakeout. So working with point groups, as you can see, these are the point groups that are in our specific templates right now. And you can create your own point groups if you want to. It's not hard to do. But, this is kind of the way the templates are set up. And, this is bare bones. If you go into, I think the NRCS default, I don't know how many point groups they have, but they have, I think, a little bit more point groups in there, set up a little bit differently. When we first originally, started with these templates, we had a engineer that was on detail in Maryland that basically had already done all this stuff in their state, and we've kind of, they were nice enough to kind of give us all their information. So we had already had a starting point that was deviated from the NRCS templates. So that's where a lot of this stuff has come from. We didn't, Jacob and I didn't start from scratch on these. So we did have some help. But these are always a work in progress. So if there's things that, you say, hey, we need a point group for this or a point group for that, most certainly, shoot me an email. And if we need to add that, we can add that to the templates. And we'll go over this in more detail once we, see it live. It's probably easier to show. But basically, talking about the hierarchy of the points, whatever's on the top is going to take precedence over everything underneath, and that's what's going to be shown. There's a no display, so you don't have to display any points, but if you had specific point groups that you wanted to show, like center lines of streams or anything with a center line or point group numbers, points whatever through whatever, you can show those specific group numbers based off of your display order. You have in the prospector tab under tool space, you have your point groups. You can expand your point groups, and under properties, you have two things displayed. When the splash window comes up, and the one on the left displays the point groups changes dialog box, and then this updates all the point groups. This on the side here, basically the one with the lines on them moves them all the way down, moves that specific point group all the way up or all the way down, and then this one just moves it up one step above or one step below that specific point group. So showing on this, what would be displayed the way I have this set up right now? If I were to bring in my points, would any points be?
Yeah, you'd have all your points.
Everything.
Yep, all your points. So that's the highest one. So if all points had a specific point style that would be an X or a cross or whatever, that's going to take hierarchy over everything in here. And I'll go over that with the survey control, that the survey control has a specific point style that as long as you have that above everything else, that point style is going to take precedence over the point style of all points. So again, all the points are displayed. And then as you go through your point groups, existing survey control is displayed, and you'll notice on here that there's a specific point style that's shown as a benchmark, as you know, displayed. So it's a little bit different. And then again, you can go into these properties of each point group, and you can change, you know, those specific properties within those point groups. And it does give you a short description of what it is, you know, point styles, the label styles that you have selected. So that's already defaulted, like I said, in the actual template itself. So that's just the general information describing it. The include tab. So on the point groups under existing survey control. So existing survey control, does anybody know what this point group does? Based off of our groups. Does it get displayed in our existing surface?
No.
Nope.
No. So it's excluded in that, and we'll go over that. So it's including the numbers matching 1 through 99. So if you accidentally, you know, had a benchmark that was 300 and, you know, you wanted to include that in your survey control, you could select it in the drawing, or you can put a comma 300, or, you know, however you want to do it. You could, it's easy enough to select it in the drawing, or if you know the actual number, you could do it that way. And then also with raw descriptions matching. So as it's stated over here, you know, the descriptions of the points will be displayed if they match. But anything after that with that asterisk, you know, you could have that put in that specific, you know, point group also. So an example would be TBM dash, you know, hub set 1. You know, that would be put in this specific point group. Excluding points. So this is the other one. So existing ground. So this one's survey control. Existing ground is excluding point numbers matching 3,000 to 9,999. So it's not including that in our existing ground surface. Also, it's not including anything with descriptions that have TBM, BM, IP, TP, RP, whatever. So if you accidentally put in, again, you know, a point group that's in, you know, say you called it 0.1000 and you called it a TBM, and if it's point group 1000 and TBM and it's matching this, and it's also within that group and excluding that TBM and 1000. Now, if I just went in an existing ground and I'm sorry, excludes points 3000, so it's including the points with 1 to basically 2,999. So it's including all those points. But the raw descriptions, it's excluding these. Now, if you want to exclude your points 1 through 99, you can add that. And, you know, as Jacob said earlier, he noticed in this that 1 through 99 was not excluded. And the reason being, I think, like I said, it allows for people, if they did start to do their survey and they forgot to, you know, start with 100, it allowed them to, you know, continue that all the way up to 2,999, and basically just excluding things that they wrote in as TBM, benchmark, IP, you know, well, things like that. So that's the way we did that. Now, if I went in there and adjusted this, comma 1 through 99, it's going to exclude all those numbers 1 through 99, or I could just say 1 through 99 and then comma 3,000 to 9,999. So it's excluding those, because this is the most important point group that we're working with to create our surface. So this is probably the most important one if any point group you're looking at, this is the one that you really need to concentrate on figuring out, okay, well, what does actually create my surface? Because when we go into our existing surface, I'll show you how you how it explains. Well, it doesn't explain it. It just shows you which point group it's pulling that existing, creating that existing surface from. So back to existing survey control points 1 through 50. You can do the point list, and it just shows you all your points. So are these points locked? Anybody know?
They are unlocked.
No.
That's right, because there's not a pencil with a cross through them. And again, here's your point style. So this is going to, trump over whatever the hierarchy is. If it's on top, it's going to, put this style of benchmark on there. And it's also going to do how whatever your point label style is. So all this information is going to trump over whatever's below that point group. And if you needed to change a description, you can do it right here. Or the other thing, you can double click on the point and you can change a description there also. But you can go through individual points, or you can actually go through the point list and change those descriptions. All right, so let's go through that real quick. So our point groups right now, all our points are showing. So the point style that's shown with the all points, if you go to properties, it has a plus, number, elevation, description. If we wanted to change that to a cross, we can click apply, and instantly it changes that style. You want to change it to a benchmark, it'll change that style. The default is the plus. Again, right click if you wanted to edit points. These are not locked, so I can go in there and change this. You can just double click. Hub 2. Well, actually, I'll call it Hub 5. And now it's changed that to Hub 5. If we needed to adjust an elevation, you could do that here also. So it doesn't restrict us with anything on these points. With SurvCE, when we had Carlson, it was a little bit more difficult to change some of this stuff. But the one beauty about this, if you make a note and it's happened to me, plenty of times during surveys where the rod person had adjusted the height from 6 foot to 7 foot and forgot to tell the person on the data collector that they adjusted that. Hopefully they took a mental note of where that's at, and then that way you can adjust those elevations. Basically it's a foot off, so you can add a foot to that elevations based off of just doing that change on the fly. Whereas with the SurvCE, it was a task to get that done. And again, if you double click on the point itself, if you click on the point and right click, edit points, it'll get you to the same splash window, the panorama window is what they call it. So you can do it specifically, for that point if you're looking at it that way, or you can go through the point groups, however you want to do it. So point groups under properties, again, this is, it gives an explanation of, what they are on your descriptions and all the points that are there. Again, up here, you can do this. I don't ever do this, like adding point groups or, removing point groups. I don't use it. And I don't even, the update point group, I've not even done that. It seems like it updates automatically. But I guess if you see something that's not changing, you might have to hit that update point group. So if I select in here, well, first of all, does anybody know what this little black mark means next to the point groups?
It means it has information or points inside of it.
That's correct. So if you don't see anything in there, so for example, if I, double click in here, or, it doesn't even let me edit points in there because there's nothing in there. Whereas if I have a black mark next to it, it allows me to edit those points. So anything that has that black dot next to it has some type of information located with it. So if you don't see your point groups, just expand them and it's going to show you all your point groups. And then to get to that little splash window to move those point groups up and down, go to your properties. So if we don't want to show any points, do I select this one or that one to go to the top? This goes
That
all the way
one.
to the top. So this is individual, as I can move it down or up. And then this will move it all the way to the bottom, all the way to the top. So whatever one you have selected, you just use these arrows to move it up and down. And hit apply. Okay. And there's no points. So we have no display. All points, click apply. All my points are now displayed. Now, all points has this property associated with it, the plus sign. And if I want to go in here, my point groups, I go to properties, and I want to put my survey control. Well, let's do it this way. Let's see what survey control has. So survey properties, the benchmark is the point style. Okay. So if I move my survey control all the way up top, what point style will that have shown when I do this? Well, I have, okay, two questions. First off, if I move this all the way to the top, what point style will it have? And two, will all the points be displayed?
I say it should have, because you have all points above no display, it should still display them all. But I guess, does it take the topmost point group display style?
Yes, that is correct.
I've never noticed that.
Yes. So you'll notice when I take this point group and I put it up to the top, you'll notice if I go to properties and I move this up, and then I go to survey control, click apply. Those properties will stay the same on these, but my survey control points will have that. That makes sense. So it's taken whatever those point controls are on that hierarchy are going to be basically, set that way. So if I had my existing survey control below my all points, okay, how do you think that's going to be shown? If I take my survey control and put underneath all points, do you think it's going to have the benchmark, or do you think it's going to have the plus sign shown?
Be a plus sign at this point.
Anybody else?
Plus.
So there you have it. So just remember, anytime you move these up and down throughout that list, it's going to take that, topmost style and apply that style to that specific point group. And then below that, that point group will then take that style over of what's needed in that point group, if that makes sense. Any questions with that? I do want to show you a little bit. If for example, I had, I don't know, this point, 511 and these two, and I didn't want those part of my existing surface. Well, let me go back real quick. So if you go to your surfaces, existing ground, if you go into your definition, you'll notice here another black dot, meaning that it has information associated with it. If I select that, what it's doing, it's saying, oh, okay, well, in order for me to make an existing ground surface, I'm using the existing ground point group to create that. So that's where you can, adjust that if you wanted to. If you wanted to delete that and you said, hey, I want to make my surface just based off of, my TBMs or, existing survey control or whatever point group you chose, you could do that. If you did all points, it's going to take in consideration all the points and just not the existing ground. So you can adjust it that way. But the default of why it's so important with the point groups is the fact that existing ground is the one that is determining your ground surface. So as it says here, the description, point group used to develop the existing ground surface shots that may have not been taken on the ground surface, such as benchmarks, well casings, and shots taken on pipe or conduits are automatically removed from the point group. And that's based off of either one, it's, the point exclusion or your description. And it's telling me how many points it's actually taken, in this existing ground. It's 431 points that it's showing. And again, you can zoom to them. So it's showing basically all the points. Now, to get back to these points that I think it was like 500 or something, it was over here. So if I wanted to add or take these, 3 points out and I wanted them, just remove from my surface, the process of doing that, you go into your point groups. Again, where's my existing ground taken from? It's from the existing ground point group. So if I right click in there, I go to my properties, exclude, select and drawing. All right, well, I don't want to have that. I messed up. That's a benchmark and that's a benchmark. So I just want to get rid of these, or I've blown the shots or whatever. Hit enter. And now you'll notice that it's taken out 509 through 511. I think the total points was 431. We'll click apply. And then if you go back down to your existing ground and your definition. So it's taking those 3 points out. So now your total number is 428 compared to the 431 that it was before. So you do have some leeway with the point groups and adjusting those, based off of, like I said, don't feel as though, if you go out and do a survey that, it's all said and done. There's a lot of ways to adjust your survey, after the fact, if you will, based off of these point groups. They're very powerful, and you can, adjust them to what is best fit for you. The one thing I will say, at a minimum, and this is probably good practice, and whatever area engineers are on this training probably will agree with me on this. But at a minimum, if you're doing any type of design for your point groups, and if you don't want to show any points on your plan view, that's fine. But at a minimum, you want to make sure that you show your survey control points at a minimum. And does anybody know why you should do that? So when I plot out my plan view, all these points should be shown on my plan view at a minimum. And why should we do that? Why should we show those?
It gives you a point of reference when you go to implement.
So if I did this survey, this year, and I don't go back out to do this stakeout, or they don't do the construction 3 years from now, and if I have a plan view with no TBMs located on my plan view, unless I actually opened up CAD and looked at the drawing, I would have no idea where these TBMs are, because I can guarantee, one, the stakes are not there. They're usually gone within a month or so. So you have to have some type of reference based off of that drawing. So I like to see the TBMs on our plans at a minimum. I don't know if anybody else is on here that review plans, but this is something that should be on there at a bare minimum.
The benchmarks should definitely be shown, and they should also have a description with them if it's not easily, known what the point is referring to.
Yes, definitely. And sometimes it does get a little bit, cumbersome on here on the actual point description. So that's why on our templates, we have, our benchmark descriptions here, trying to describe, okay, what your, TBM or benchmark, what the elevation is, and then what it actually is referring to. So kind of what Brian alluded to, make sure that you describe that, descriptively. So if you did the survey this year and a new person goes out there to stake it out next year and you're not around, they're able to take this drawing and either figure out exactly where those benchmarks are, or they can pull tapes based off of the plan view. That's to scale. So if you had a corner of a building here or something, you could scale this off of this benchmark to find that benchmark. So it's very important to have these on the plan view.
I'll add too, if you're in an actual horizontal datum, then the northern and eastern coordinates should also be included in that description. So then it can be, reestablished by that if it's not found, or, for whatever other reason.
Yeah, that's a great point. All right. So the next thing, and I know I don't know, most people print these out or not, but they should be printed out and they should be put into the tech folder at a minimum. Not to say that they have to be uploaded with the design file per se, but they should be at a minimum printed out in the tech folder, the points that you've done. It's probably nice to have them, printed out, and it could be just a text file, or it could, go through this way, and print a report this way. So the way you can do it, and again, there's multiple ways of doing this. This is just one way. You can go to your toolbox, making sure that tool space is open. Go to your toolbox. And if your toolbox is not shown, I'll show you how to, in tool space, to make sure that that's shown, because you'll see on this, there's 4 tabs on my end: prospector, settings, survey, toolbox. Technically, you really don't have to have surveys shown, because like I said, we don't do the survey database. So technically you don't have to have that shown, but I'll show you the little icons that you can turn on and off to show those tabs. Go to the miscellaneous utilities under the toolbox, go to reports, select the points, and then points report. And then right click on that and hit execute. Then it comes up with another window here stating that, here's all the points. You can print all your points. You can, specify a point group that you wanted to, list out, or you can, select them all. In this case, we're just going to select them all. And then it gives you the selected points, what the northern and eastern elevation, basically the same format that was how they were imported. And then here you can actually, have the different columns you want shown. If you want the point number shown, if you want the northern shown, the eastern shown, elevation and full description as you go down here, or maybe you just want the point group shown. You can do all these. You can select more or whatever, but you can create that report. However, at a minimum, you want to have at least the point number, the northern, eastern elevation, and the description of that specific point. And then the next step is that there's a little folder here that you want to select the file location and type. The default is HTML. I don't know why, but that's the default. So if you hit create report right now, it's going to save it in this location as a HTML. I always hit the folder and then I adjust it, with a type. Most of the time it's a Excel file is normally I do the Excel file, but you can do a Word document if you wanted to. Then you can adjust, some things in there, and I'll show you that. Then hit create report. And then you save that in that working folder. And then in this case, it was done as an Excel file. And you see the points number, northern, eastern elevation, full description. And then the nice thing about this, as you created that Excel file, you can enter the correct information in here if you want to. It's always nice to put the, at least the client's name and maybe just what the project is, just so it doesn't get mixed up in another file. But it's always good to have this in your file, because when you go out into the field, and if your data collector, takes a crap or something and you have to do something by hand, most certainly you can look at these points and, check them that way. But having that hard copy is always nice to have.
Hey, Dan, can I add something real quick?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I just wanted to mention this past year when they did the national audit of the engineering stuff for the state, when they were reviewing the engineering files, the very first question they asked was, is there a copy of the survey, and was it closed? So it's a very good idea to make sure you at least have a paper copy in the file. And I suggest to all my guys to put that printout of that report, or a saved electronic file in the designs, when they submit them. So it's okay. So it's all right there for the future.
Yep. Good. That's great to know. And I did see that report, Brian. And the one question I had, and it might be going back to older surveys, and this is something that I'm going to have to get an answer from a surveyor, I guess. But since using GPS, is it required to do a closed circuit checking back in? How do you do that? Are you aware of that, or been told or explained about that? How to close a survey with GPS?
Not specifically when using GPS, no.
Okay.
But I mean, you still should go back to, maybe back to your benchmark. You initially set up your, right. I guess it depends on exactly what GPS equipment you're using, but you're usually setting out benchmarks from your initial instrument point where you started at. It would still be a good idea once you're done to go back and close on that, just to verify that nothing has, drastically changed in the time that you were doing the survey. So I would still suggest doing it that way, as if you were doing a regular one with a total station.
Okay. Yeah, and that was just one question that I had, because in Cecil County, we have a hybrid system. So we have the robotics along with the GPS, and you'll notice in this survey that, we checked back in, on this, point 50, and that point 50 was our IP hub 1. So it was 50.677 and the check-in was 50.675. And I know old school way, when, we were doing, the total station and a self level and level or dumpy level, whatever you want to call it, we had to do a formula. And if anybody's taken Ken's Wolf survey class, you had an allowable error that you could do. And I don't know how that happens in the electronic world of things, I guess, is my question. I did look up in the NEM manual that there is one in surveying, and they did, or actually it's the engineering field handbook, that they updated the chapter 1 of survey, and they did add GPS in there. I didn't read all the way through it because there's a lot of pages on it, but I kind of glanced through it, but I didn't see anything about checking back in using GPS. But that's something we probably, engineering side of things, we need to probably let folks know what's required by them to do so.
Yeah, we can. I'll make note of that, and I'll discuss that with the rest of the guys, and we'll let everybody know once
Awesome.
we come to a decision.
Great, thanks.
Yep.
All right, so let's go, and we're doing the printout for these points. And like Brian said, on the national audit, we it was noted that we didn't have these in our folder. So it sounds to me that folks are not doing this. So this is good. Not good that we're not doing it, but good that we're going over it. So on the home tab, you'll notice the tool space. So here's a little toolbox. If I uncheck it, you'll notice the toolbox disappears on my tab. Settings, and then this one here is my survey tab. So if you ever see anything on here that's missing, just make sure you go to your tool space, make sure it's turned on, and then you can select all these to get those tabs back on. I don't know why this toolbox used to always be red, but I don't know why they went with gray now. I guess just to confuse people, but it used to be red up there, because when I first looked at it, I'm like, where's the toolbox at? Like, I can't find it, because it used to always be red, but now it's gray. So that's how you turn those on and off. When we go into our points and we want to create the report, we go into the miscellaneous utilities, a little box here, go to your reports. And again, you can do reports for anything. So if you have specific alignments in here, you can do this also, with your alignments. If you have corridors, you have profiles, you can do reports on those also. It's not just specific to points, but in this one, we're just going to go into a points report. Again, right click, execute. Comes up with the window, and in this case, we're going to show all the points. And you'll notice right now, nothing is shown. You have to make sure you hit this list points. And now it lists all those selected points that we, did here. So if we unselect all, and then if we just did, I don't know, let's do our survey control. List points. So now it's only selecting my survey control points. So you can do it that way, or you could just do all points and list them that way. That's the easiest thing to do, and that's what my recommendation would be. And then that way you have all your points listed. Again, you can move this stuff up and down, just like in the point groups. So you select one, you can move it up. So this is just basically showing what's going to be shown in there. I think, yeah. I mean, as long as you have them selected, I mean, you really don't need to show them in that order, but you just want to make sure that the point number, the northern, eastern elevation, and the full description is selected. It's going to ask you where to save that report to, and the default is that HTML file type. So if you did create report, it's going to default to that. So it's suggested that you just go ahead and hit the folder, and it's going to ask you where to put that. And then again, it's still defaulting that HTML. So if I do an Excel file, I'm just going to overwrite the one that I had. Click save. Yeah, I'll overwrite it. Create the report. And it'll automatically create the report and open it up in Excel or whatever file format you created it in. So now you'll see here, it's an Excel format. And you can go in here and, and you can put prepared by. whatever you want to do. If you wanted to delete that line, you can do that. And I would recommend just leaving the date and the time on there. And then that way, you know, when you plotted this and if it's the most accurate, set of points that you have here. As you can see, this is all the points that was taken in that design, and it's an Excel file format too. So with that being said, if you wanted to, search for a specific number, or if you wanted to put, you can definitely go in here and do a filter on that if you wanted to. So if you wanted to just show, point number 6, click OK. It's just like using Excel. So that's why I like using Excel for my point printouts. You just have more options with it. That's all. Everybody understand that? Any questions on that? Because it sounds like this is going to be something that, moving forward in the future that is going to be required, and it should be, in there, in our files. And as Brian alluded to, that, if we put that in our, zip file, it's probably just a good idea just to put it in a zip file, and that way it's part of the whole entire package. And maybe that's something that we need to update on our SharePoint checklist, that we have that point list in there, reminding folks that they need to print that out and incorporate it into our zip file.
Yeah, just one quick question. The TXT file gives pretty much the same information, and same with the raw file, the raw
Yes.
data collector. Could it be either or does it? Are you guys looking to have this Kogo point report like that format? It is clear. I'm just wondering, it's the same information on both. So, Brian, do you have a preference of what you would like? And to me, the TXT file, it works great because then you can just, it's the same file that you literally uploaded. Right. So that's it. Just gives you your point number, northing, easting, elevation, and then descriptions. And the raw file gives you even more, like whenever you change your rod height and the dates and the times and even the temperature.
Now, I guess on the raw file, you have to do that through the data collector, correct?
Yeah, it's the same way. Well, at least on the TopCon, the magnet, it's the same way. You just select, instead of points as your data, you select your raw.
Yep.
And then I've been doing RW5 files because those open up nicely into a text document, and that just works for us over here. And that's what I've been uploading and with the zip file. But if you guys want it in the report, I'm fine with doing either or. It's easier for the text file and the raw data. It's just one movement. That's it. But whatever you guys want. I just was wondering if there's a preference or if there's what you guys think.
Yeah, I think as long as you have a copy of the points in the file, I think if it's the raw file, if it's the text file, or if it's the file format that I just showed you, as long as you have documentation somewhere that you can take out in the field or have it in the folder, I think anything is good. Creating points for stakeout. Again, this is just a way, once you have your design completed, and you want to, the contractor asks you to, stake out, and we have to be careful with, saying that we're staking out points. We have to use that very loosely. We don't want to be held responsible of making a mistake that we staked out a point for a contractor, and for some whatever reason we gave them the incorrect elevation, and they said, oh, well, you staked that point out for us, that's the benchmark, that's what we went off of. I always try to use it as verifying. We're verifying the elevation, and we just have to make sure at the time of the pre-construction meeting that if a contractor says, can you stake this out for us? Sure, we can stake it out, but make sure that you double check our elevations, because we're not held responsible for those elevation mistakes. If we make a mistake, everybody's human, we make mistakes. But if we set those grades and they go off of those grades, and and it's off, technically we're held responsible if we stake those out. And we told them, oh yeah, we wrote in the consigs, staked out the elevations, explain to contractor what the elevations were. If we don't write down in there that, verified elevation and contractor to, use elevation and double check elevation prior to excavation or whatever, you just want to make sure that you're not telling them that that elevation is specific to what we set, because you could get yourself in trouble on that. So just be careful on the wording on this. I'm using stakeout here, generically, just because that's, what we're doing. But when you're explaining it to a contractor, you don't want to say stakeout. The point group that we're going to be using is 3,000 to 4,999. This is where we use the drop down to show more properties. So, if you don't see any of this come up, just make sure you hit that drop down. And then the one thing that, you need to start with is the point identity. So it's going to, after your survey has been completed, you import your points, and say your last point in your survey was point, 455. The next point number that's going to be added to this survey is going to be 456. So it's going to default to that 456. That's just how Civil 3D, works. So if I were to go in and add a point without coming down here and putting in 3,000, it's going to be 456. So if you expand your point identity, the next point number, just make sure you put it in that 3,000 starting point, or wherever you're at in your stakeout. If you're, just make sure it's in that range, 3,000 to 4,999. Again, a couple ways of doing this. I'm only going to show you the manual way, but there are, you can go station offset, you can do direction distance. There's so many ways of doing this, and you can see for yourself on what's easiest for you. You can do an offset along a specific waterway. If you had a waterway and you wanted to do a point every 50 foot along that waterway center line, you can do an offset 50 foot every 100 foot, or every 50 foot offset every 100 feet. And you can put that in here, station offset object, and put those parameters in there, and it'll do it along that. Manual is just, an easy way to do it, because, maybe in this example that I'm going to show you, we're just going to put, top of a riser and the outlet of the pipe, for a manual point location. So you can select manual, and then it'll come up with the command line, please specify location for the new point. Then you'll be prompted to enter in the description first, and then you'll be prompted to enter the elevation. And then once you create that elevation, put that elevation in there, it basically creates a point. And based off of your stakeout point group, it's going to show you the point number, the elevation, and description. So it's basically going to be the same as what your existing ground point layer style or point style is. So it's just your number, elevation, and description. And you can change that. So if you wanted your stakeout points to be magenta or something, so you can see them, you can change that. And I've done that in the past, but most certainly you can adjust that as we did earlier, adjusting those styles. And this, like I said, just going over, here's the, going out with the different points, 3,000 to 4,999, and it's on the proposed staking point group. And you'll also notice that the existing survey control points will be shown. And that's because in order to do your stakeout, you're going to have to know where those benchmarks are located, so you can set up on to, create those stakeout points. Again, some items to consider on this. Just make sure that the contractor landowner is aware that we will assist in the layout, but they are responsible for making sure that the grades are correct. This should be discussed during the pre-construction meeting. Remember that we are not setting the grades for the contractor / landowner. We are verifying the elevation and location. Ask the contractors as to what is needed from them. Do they want offsets or do they want actual location of the point? And make sure that you're creating the correct elevation. Is it finished grade or is it subgrade? And that's a whole nother training when we go into surveying and what's actually written on the stake. There's certain ways to draw on the stakes. On the back side of the stake, if you have an offset, it's like a circle with a plus in it, and then you put your offset distance and then the description, and on the front of the stake it should read the cut mark, and that's in the engineering field handbook that goes over that of what should be placed on those stakes. But I guess my main point to this whole exercise for the stakeout is that just make sure you communicate with the contractor and the landowner as what you're doing, as far as, the points that they're wanting and, the elevations that they're looking for. You don't want to put all kinds of stakes all over the place. And, you take half a day, putting stakes out there, and it's right in the middle where they do have to do all their excavation. And they're like, why did you put all these stakes out here? I have to go through all this. So just communicate, at the time of the pre-construction meeting with all the contractors of what their needs are. So let's do that real quick in Civil 3D. So I'm just going to turn all my points on real quick. Again, you have to be on a certain layer. No, it's going to automatically put it on that survey point layer. Keep that in mind too. So point groups. So the first thing to do, if you want to do any type of points, if you go to create, again, here's your create, or go to points, point creation tools. The drop down, the first thing we need to do is what do we need to change this to if we're doing a stakeout?
3,000.
Yep, the 3,000. And now we can just basically minimize that. Go back to our manual. And now it prompts me, as long as I have this dynamic input on, it's going to show me on my screen. But if I don't have that on, it's going to show me down at my command line. Some people like to see that right in front of their face compared to actually moving their eyes down here. So in this case, I'm just going to put a point here. I just left click, enter point description, top, riser, and then it's going to say an elevation. And in this case, we'll just say, I don't know, 55.0. Hit enter. It's created that point, 3055, top of riser, and then say down here, I'm going to do my outlet. So I can say outlet, barrel, specify elevation. I don't know, we'll say 32.5, enter, and then enter to stop the command. So right now, if you notice what's going to happen, you're going to see all these need to be updated, these points, because different points have been placed in here. So once you hit update, it updates those points, takes those exclamation points away. If you look at your proposed surface definition and you go to point groups, you'll notice that on the proposed surface, everything is under staking under your proposed surface. When you're looking at your proposed surface, and we'll get this more into creating surfaces and things like that, this is where you might want to change this or adjust this based off of the points that you're putting in, because it's going to create that proposed surface off of these points that are in there. Same way with as-built. So if I were to click on the as-built, what point group do you think the as-built is on? Any guesses? As-built. Again, your point groups, go to as-built. That's the points, including what? 5,000 and 9,999. So when you actually go out and do an as-built survey, you can create a surface of an as-built surface based off of these numbers that you create, and it'll put it on a specific layer or a specific surface with a specific surface style. So now we have point groups in here that, have staking in them. So now what I like to do personally is on my point groups, if I go to my properties, I always like to take my plot, my stakeout points for staking, bring that to the top, do my no display to the top, and bring it right below my staking points. So it's including all these numbers, and also your TBMs and your staking. Of course, we got this set a little bit different, but so you also notice that we have our top riser, outlet of barrel. And the reason why they're shown in staking is because, again, we want to know where our TBMs are set. So in order for us to go to stake this out, that's set in that point group property. So we know if we have to stake this out, our TBMs are going to be shown, our existing survey control points are shown. So that's why those points are shown in that staking. So what I like to do when I'm, going to stake something out, I always like to make a copy of this. Once it's been completed, with obviously with everything on, but at least showing where my points are at. Because keep in mind, when you're setting these survey points up, if you really don't like the person that's going to do the stakeout, set a survey point up, stakeout point here, and then another one way over here, and then another one way over here, and then they'll really like you. But you try to do it in sequential order. Obviously you don't want to do one like that and then one over here and then one down here. You want to kind of keep it, as the person's walking along. So if you're set up here, you want to start your survey, stakeout points going along here. This is, edge of water, whatever. Then your top up pipe and, anything to deal with a riser. Maybe your emergency spillway would be a separate, stakeout point. So keep in mind of, what you're, staking out. Even with ENS controls, I stake out the silt fence, or, if there's a pump around or something that, we're proposing, we'll give a general location or what have you. Anything that, might be relative to the design that, you think that you might either one, want to check the elevation on, or two, want to check the location of, I would put in your stakeout points. And it doesn't have to have an elevation. You can adjust that on the fly, with your data collector. So if you put your silt fence, at elevation 0, you're really not setting an elevation for your silt fence. All you're setting is the location. You just want to know that the contractor needs to put silt fence down along this bottom. So you're just putting those shots in there along that, silt fence location, and not caring about the actual elevation of that silt fence. Do people use stakeout points? And if so, do you have any recommendations or anything different that you do, or any suggestions? I'm hoping people are using this. I know they're, like I said, it's very useful. The equipment that we have is, expensive equipment, and we should be trying to use it to its fullest ability. So by staking this stuff out, when I first started, if we're out in the middle of a field, I mean, it was like pulling teeth trying to, pull off of something and trying to figure out, where are we at out in the middle of the field to put in this, waste storage tank, that we had no benchmarks that we can pull a chain or pull a tape from or anything. So doing it this way, I mean, we're very spoiled, doing this, I think, because it's all right there. I mean, and the map's there, and you can say, oh man, I'm way off. It's not even showing in the right location. So it's always nice to, have those points in there, even during construction checks. If you have those points in there, it takes, 5-10 minutes to set up a total station or whatever, and you have that in your data collector and you just want to do a quick construction check, it tells you, hey, what's the cut fill? Is this contractor on or off? And you can let them know right away that what needs to be done. So that's the points, basically putting the points in your design. The next step is we have to actually export those points and put them back into the data collector so we can do the actual stakeout. So we're exporting the points and placing them in I'm showing it in Magnet software, but it'd be the same thing for SurvCE. You just basically, instead of exporting the ASCII file, you're importing the ASCII file. But in this, you're doing the same thing. You're going to export it. So you're going to select all your points. And there's a couple ways of doing this. If you already have your file that's in data collector, you can just export that specific, point group. So if it's just your staking point group, you can do that. You can export all your points and just overwrite your file, to that. Also, the one thing I will, just kind of let you know just from experience, that you just want to make sure that you're working with the most current file that you have in that data collector. So for instance, I went and did a survey yesterday, and I took shots, and today I went out and did the survey, and I downloaded those shots in the Civil 3D, and I created my stakeout points. Now I went in and I today I went in there and added a benchmark, and I didn't upload that into my Civil 3D. Okay. What happens if I overwrite that file when I select it into Magnet, or if I merge it? There's two ways of doing it. You can merge it or overwrite it. I always overwrite it just because I make a habit of, making sure that I have the most up-to-date file, but I always overwrite it. But merging is probably your safest bet, where you can merge it with the existing file and it'll just add those points that you need. You just want to make sure that if you do that, you're aware that you have, no other points that have been uploaded in that data collector that, maybe one of the staff members went out in the office and took another shot, and then you overwrote that and now you lost that control point. So just make sure that you have the most current job that's in Civil 3D that you're exporting to. And two, if you're not sure of it, just go ahead and merge the points instead of overwriting them into the actual file. So from tool space, you just right click your points, export, select your format again, where you're going to save it. And again, you can save this, into your working folder. And I always like to put stakeout at the end of it, just so I'm aware of that, this is a stakeout file. It still might have all the points, or it might just have the stakeout points, but at least I know that, there's additional points other than the original points in that file. And again, the elevation adjustment, I just keep that checked. So you'll notice in this, once you export that, I always like to go back into my text file and just make sure, all right, did all my points come in that ASCII file or that text file before I actually upload it into the data collector? And then again, you want to make sure that, you want to print this out and have that, on record, again, taking it out to the field or what have you. This one here, as you can see, 330, 1062.2, obviously that's not going to be, the correct elevation. And the beauty of this is when you're in that stakeout, function in the data collector, you can adjust that on the fly. You can change that elevation to whatever you want. So for instance, if a contractor said, oh yeah, I want the finished grade, and then all of a sudden he said, oh, you know what, I really want the subgrade of the stone, then you can calculate that and, subtract that off of, the elevation. If you had finished here, you could subtract that 10 inches or whatever the case may be, and you can adjust that elevation on the fly. And again, exporting the points from Civil 3D and adding them in the Magnet. Like I said, if you don't have a job on the data collector, you go ahead and make the new job. If you already have it, you can merge the points into the existing job, or like I said, overwrite them, but merge is probably your safest bet. Click the exchange button. In the beginning, when we were exporting them to the USB, we were doing 2 file. Now we're actually taking it from the file. So we're from the flash drive, USB and bringing it in. So it's from file. Select the point stakeout file, the text file that you're looking at. Make sure everything is selected the same, PNEZD. Now, one thing I didn't mention, if you select header and first row and that's checked, you'll notice that you'll get an error on the style. And what that header in the first row shows, it basically shows your name, elevation, codes. So you can print this out. So if you want to export this text file format, it'll have this header in the first row. As you noticed before, I think Ryan had made the comment about, doing the RW5 file. But if you have that header in the first row, if people don't know that it's Northern Eastern, you might want to select the header in the first row if you're printing out this text file. So whoever's looking at it knows that the first thing is the point. The next one is the Northern Eastern elevation description, just to keep that in mind too. And then in this case, it's telling me that 2 points were imported. So this is important. So if you had 10 points that you actually created and only 2 points were imported, something went wrong. And then it's always good before you go out in the field, just to check the map and just make sure, hey, is that point location, really where it's supposed to be before heading out in that field. So again, we have our points. We're going to go to export, PNEZD, destination file. I'm just going to overwrite this. So now if I go back into that file, and then if I go to stakeout, again, you just want to verify the points that you put in there are correct. And this is where I was saying with the header, like it's not showing anything in there. If you had that selected, you would have the point and then the Northern Eastern Z and description. Any questions on any of that? Have people used stakeout points?
Yeah, I was using them on Monday.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, I use them frequently. One of the things I do, I don't know if you mentioned this, but on top of like printing the full point list from your survey is when you put all your stakeout points in there, if you print out just a list of the stakeout points, sometimes that can help you if you do get mixed up, if you didn't place them in a correct order and they're all kind of all over the place.
Yep. No, absolutely. Yeah, you should definitely print out that staking list, point list for sure. Again, this is, if you have a question to ask, it's the same slide that I keep putting in all my trainings. There's multiple ways of doing the same thing. Use the one that works best for you. This isn't, the only way that you can get to these endpoints. There's many different ways of doing it. Using the help sources, and that brings me to kind of what Zach was talking about. I just want to kind of show you this retrieve. So this is something is a training, and people can get requests on this. And this is just everything you want to know about Civil 3D, and it's very good. It does go in a lot more depth. If you have time to sit down and go through these, you can most certainly do so. But the layout is very good because you can jump to specific topics or functions of the program itself. So a lot of this stuff will repeat itself, that I've done some of these things, but a lot of this stuff is in here, and it goes over all this information. And it's, like I said, it's under Maryland Retrieve, NRCS Retrieve, and anybody can get access to that. It's geared towards folks that are, it's not geared towards people that don't have any experience in AutoCAD. This is more Civil 3D and using Civil 3D. So if you're looking for more generic uses, I would say there's basic AutoCAD free stuff out there for just AutoCAD. So if you're a beginner user, please let me know, and I can send you some links to free stuff that's out there for training purposes. But this is one, I know people have asked about, surfaces and grading tools. I know Zach just did a training last week that, was put on and through AgLearn, and this is what they used. I know some folks, feel as though some of these things can be above and beyond what we do. So I really don't try to, I guess, make folks go to this site for that reason, because it can get very overwhelming. The trainings that I put on are trainings that are kind of minimum amount of information that you need to know to get a design done and, produce a plan and get it approved. But it doesn't mean that if you want to learn more about Civil 3D and, start learning, the more in depth of Civil 3D, this is available to you. So don't feel as though that I'm holding it back from you by any means. It's just, I don't like to share that too much, just because there is a lot of stuff, a lot of information in there, and my trainings are trying to kind of take that information and bring it down to a level where it's a lot easier and it's a lot less information out there. And if you do want access to that, the suggestion is that, email your area engineer if you want access to that retrieve site, and then they can forward it up to Jaquay, and then he can get you access for that retrieve. But it is, like I said, it is good, but it does go into a lot of other steps within Civil 3D, and also it's geared towards the NRCS templates. It's not geared towards our Maryland templates. So if they're explaining something and it goes on a specific layer or what have you, surfaces and things like that, you might get confused as if, it's not what we're using here in Maryland. So that's another reason we kind of, held back from, pushing that a little bit, further. Any other questions out there, or comments, criticisms, concerns? And we still have 15 more minutes for questions allotted for this. So,
Hey Dan, I've got a comment.
Sure.
As far as the stakeout, we actually used the stakeout mode on a 2-year-old survey where the witness posts were gone and relocated. We found their old hubs and verified the elevations. One hub was rotted out, was no good, but the other hub was still good. So you can use stakeout for that if you still have your station 1 in your benchmark. You can use stakeout to find old hubs.
Yep, that's great. Yeah, I mean, I've done that before too. The one thing that I found useful, at least in our district, and I don't know what other districts do, but we had the district purchase a metal detector, and we use mag nails with a wooden lathe, and basically, we pound those in the ground. They're 9-inch, stakes. Basically, we pound in the ground, and we have that mag nail in there. So if that stake gets removed, the actual stake above the ground gets removed, at least we have the metal detector to use that. I don't know what other folks use out there, but that's what we found useful, at least in our district.
Hey, Dan.
Yes.
When creating your own points, does that only work with a GPS unit? What if you have a total station?
No. So creating those points, great question. I've done stakeout ever since I had a total station when we were using 5,000, and you can do it with GPS long as you localize it. So if you did a original survey that was based off of 5,000, there's ways to localize your survey and use GPS and localize that survey based off of that 5,000 location, believe it or not. But no, the answer to your question, yes, you can use stakeout for total station, GPS, anything electronic, robotics. Yep. Now I will say with GPS, me personally, so we have a hybrid system, and GPS is nowhere near as accurate as line of sight. So if you're doing stakeout points for a corner of a building, I would not recommend doing any type of stakeout with GPS for a corner of a building. That would be line of sight. You're setting up and back sighting on, benchmarks and things of that nature. GPS is good for if you want to kind of get a quick, idea. Hey, are they kind of in the vicinity? Are they kind of at the right elevation, within a couple tenths, and it's not a huge deal? GPS is great for that. But if you're using it for specific elevations that are crucial to your design and what needs to be done, do not use GPS. And sometimes, having the survey and be, 7 feet off, it might have been you, and that's just it. Like, if you go out there and that survey's 7 foot off and you're trying to figure things out, and it's just like, oh, what's going on? I put the stakeout point at this elevation, it's showing this elevation, what's right, what's wrong. So I always try to go back to, doing line of sight for all my stakeout. I almost never use GPS for stakeout. And it varies, on the conditions too. How many satellites you're going to have? Is it a cloudy day? There's a lot of varying conditions, especially if you're not using RTK. RTK, I would say that's a little bit better than using just a GLONASS with the base station and your rover. It's still not to the point where I would feel comfortable doing any stakeout. And if there's any surveyors on here, please speak up and let me know if I'm speaking out of terms on that by any means. Any other questions or comments?
And I noticed when you had your drawing pulled up that some of your points had like a longer description or longer point name than some of the others. How are you, when you're surveying in the field, how are you getting that longer description in there for those points?
So are you just saying like where it says ground shot, and then fallen tree or whatever?
Yeah, or like some of your TBMs had a description of what the TBM actually was.
Oh yeah, so you can just type it in, long as you have, so IP is instrument point. So that's some people use TBM, some people do BM for benchmark. We do instrument point, for hubs. And then you can just put, like I said, based on those properties within the point group, again, long as you have this in front of it, your prefix, you can put in whatever you want after it and it will show that.
Okay. I guess I'm questioning where in the data collector, like if I'm using the code TBM.
Yes. You could just start typing TBM after that. So I don't know what data collector you're using, if you're using SurvCE or if you're using the TopCon.
FC 5000.
Yeah, so when you type in IP and IP pops up, you'll hit that and then you can just, select it in that box and then you can just type whatever you want afterwards.
Okay, I thought by doing that I was going to mess up where that point, like what point group that was put in or
nope.
Something. Okay.
Nope. So that's why, going over the properties of that point group where it's including it with that asterisk. If I didn't have that asterisk next to it, then it would only put TBM in there and it would not put that in that, specific group unless you had points 1 through 99. So that's the other thing, as long as you're 1 through 99 and, have one of this involved, you should be good.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that clarification.
Yep. Any other questions anybody has or any of the trainings that were put on prior to this? All right. Well, that's all I have. Well, thanks everybody. I appreciate it and enjoy the rest of your day and rest of your week.